Hopefully you feel very proud of yourselves this morning, having been a good example to all those others who just merely visited yesterday for the talk. Yeah, and they say, wow, these guys have been here since Friday night already. You know, maybe next time we'll come earlier. You know, it's a very nice atmosphere yesterday. Yeah? Yeah, it was like nice to see a place full of people. Yeah, I think it's how it should be. Yeah. Yeah, you choose it. You chose it. It's a little bit more basic than the previous topics, but there you go. It's a good one. Last time I gave this talk was actually in Macy's. Macy's IT department. Yeah, which happens to be in Georgia. Yeah, and they were all stressed out. So yes, they found it quite helpful. All these people working for deadlines. So yes, maybe you have something in common with Macy's IT workers. Meditation and stress. More and more there's a connection being drawn between the two. Because if you are stressed and you don't know about meditation, the sort of alternatives available to you are not too interesting. Usually amounts to sort of sleeping pills. Yeah, because you go to your doctor and they say, well, you know, you're stressed, what's the problem? And the symptoms are I can't sleep, so they give you more sleeping pills so that you can sleep. But it doesn't actually take your stress away. So yeah, it's after some time you build up resistance to those sleeping tablets, so you need to take more of them, so it doesn't actually solve the problem. Yeah, so stress can be serious. Apparently over 105 million working days are estimated to be lost each year because of work-related stress. This is figures from the UK. And 40% of work-related illness was due to workplace stress, again, from England. And I think that in England they don't work half as hard as we in the States. So they probably have some figures which are even more scary from around here. So stress is something to be taken seriously. It's what you might call a modern day sort of illness. I think in the old days stress wouldn't be considered something you go to your doctor about, or maybe they just didn't have it. Yeah, and sort of chased wild animals around the forest, and you know, that sort of way of relaxing. Yeah, but these days we're not supposed to chase animals around the forest anymore, so you know, chase them around the supermarket instead. So if we look at what stress is made up of, you can see that you can consider it as, in terms of what causes it in the first place, the trigger or condition. This would be if you can blame your stress on something that caused it that's not within you. But there's also the inner component as well, which is maybe your assumptions or beliefs, which mean that you may respond to the stress differently from the next person. Some people may go through the same situation together, but one comes out of it stressed, the other one is just as healthy as when they started. So there's obviously something component on the inside as well. Also, your perceptions of a situation can have a big effect on whether it forms a stress reaction or not. And the way you respond to it can be more or less dramatic, but the responses include physiology, your behaviors and your emotions as well. Interestingly, in terms of psychological type, when we get our 4 letters coming out, those are all the ones that we are good at using when we are not stressed. But when we are stressed, all the ones on the flip side come out. All the ones that we're not very good at handling. So all these people, like, who are normally very level-headed, end up having quite strong emotions, and they don't know what to do about it. So, yeah, it's strange. Stress does funny things to people. In terms of the outside events that trigger the stress, they tend to come into 2 different categories. Type 1 stress tends to be particular well-defined events that maybe happen now and then, where you can probably pin down quite easily what triggered something. So clearly definable triggers, type 1 stress. And examples of these might be: you burned your toast. This is a disaster in England. Your printer runs out of ink. Yeah. So therefore you have stress. But the solution to the stress may be quite simple. You get a fresh slice of bread, or you replace the ink cartridge, and your stress levels go back down to their normal level. So for those sorts of stress, type 1 stress, the reaction on the inside to your stress may not be worth investing too much time in exploring the inner stress feelings that you have. It's better just to sort out the trigger. But for type 2 stress, these are more vaguely defined. They are the sort of things where stress builds up over a long time. The so-called straw that broke the camel's back, because they have had so much straw piled on already that it's just the final one which finishes off the poor camel. Not so easily resolved, and this is where sometimes, instead of trying to track the stress back down to what caused it, you'd be better dealing with the reaction to it. And examples of this would be ongoing conflict maybe with your parents, or persistent financial distress, like you can imagine debt, which sort of piles on, and in the end you just don't know what to do about it anymore because it's just so much of it, so the response is an internal one. A bad relationship, not so readily resolved, but when you talk about working with your response to the stress rather than the trigger, that makes a lot more sense for these type 2 stressors. So there are different sorts of stress. Also, you can analyze them in terms of time stress. I think we go into these in more detail in just a second. So when you have a deadline, particularly to meet, so you become more stressed as you get closer to the deadline. There is anticipatory stress, which I guess is a little bit like stage fright, where you are not scared of what's going to happen to you, but you're scared of the thought of what might happen to you. Situational stress, usually situations that are not under your control. Encounter stress, where you're scared of a particular person or coming across them. So, look at time stress first of all. The common situation is where you feel trapped by a lack of time to complete a task. Different people have different responses to time stress, and I should add that sometimes stress can be a good thing, so-called EU stress. Yeah, it's because it makes you wake up and do something, so it has good right. But sometimes it becomes too much as well. So that's when it becomes a negative influence. Psychological type is also interesting, that people who sometimes if you give them a deadline, they do their work better. Sometimes it's a disaster. Some people do their work best at the last moment. Generally it would be the P's amongst you. Yeah, of your 4 letters, the one on the end will tell you how you respond best to a deadline. Yeah, you have a P. But the J's, yeah, if you need to give them fair warning if you've got a deadline coming up, otherwise they will hate you. Yeah, you need to be well prepared and have everything ticked off by the time they come to that final deadline. So what can one do about stress? Some solutions, yeah, learn to manage your time better, and you may have recourse to the that matrix you may have come across in management, where you try to separate what is urgent and what is important as separate from one another. Some things are urgent, but they are not important. A lot of people get those two things confused. For example, if the phone rings, it's only going to ring for a few minutes. So in some senses that's urgent that you pick up. But what they phoned you about may not be important. You get a lot of like cold calls and stuff, I notice, you know, which is really annoying, because what you're in the middle of when the phone rang may be a lot more important than that. So, you know, get yourself an answer phone or something, I don't know, a secretary even, yes. So sometimes being able to have that uninterrupted time is pretty important, so that you can do really important things. It may not actually be urgent, but they need time. Yeah, and if you don't have that time, then they don't get completed. So, you know, if you have revision to do, maybe it's better to go and sit in the library where you're not going to be phoned up by someone who just wants a chat. You can try creating more time in your day. Some people apparently like to go to work a little bit early, not because they get paid for it, but because by the time work officially starts, they are organized and ready to go. They got all the papers in order or whatever. That half an hour can save them a lot of stress from, you know, being caught out at the last moment unorganized. Yeah. I'm not saying take your work home with you, but yeah, this can be a solution. Learning to delegate is a skill which is very useful. If you are a nice person, everyone wants to give you things to do. So sometimes there's something to be said for playing a role again, and pretending to be like unapproachable, so that people go and give their work to someone else to do. Yeah, yeah, it can work. Delegating work, yeah, it takes skill. The good one is the Tom Sawyer painting the fence thing, yeah, where you actually get people to feel it's a privilege to be able to help you doing something. Yeah, you're not familiar with Tom Sawyer? Like, yes. No? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm sure it's part of the sort of your upbringing. Yes? Okay. Then you paint the fence. Yeah. So fence painting meditation. Yeah. But in fact, they have a point. Yeah. But it may be not quite so much sort of sitting on the meditation mat. And they call it merit as well. It makes it even more of a privilege. Yes. I'm not saying it's not merit, but it's sort of it's a way of sort of making it more interesting. Even what might be considered. If you call it a chore, then no one wants to do it. No. Yeah, we don't have any chores in the temple. No, we have. They found some interesting words in English for it. A boon is the Thai sort of. Yeah. No, and it means merit. I think something like community service or something like that. But it's it's a way to make it more interesting for people to join in with. Being assertive. If you're this sort of typical nice person, sometimes people just take advantage of you. I'm not saying that you should turn into a sort of monster, but everything to do with assertiveness training seems to probably be quite helpful if you didn't already know it. Sometimes people don't know how you feel about something, so they keep giving you more work. So sometimes you need to tell them. And I think assertiveness training says you have to tell people 3 things. Firstly, you tell them what is wrong. Secondly, you tell them how it makes you feel. And then you tell them what you like to do about it. And many people, they simply don't realize what you are thinking about something, especially if you're an introvert. So being assertive may mean informing people, probably in the politest possible terms, that why you are not happy about the fact that they are piling up work on you when they're not giving it to anyone else. Yeah. So your neighborly love means that you should basically just turn the other cheek in every case. But I think in Buddhism we turn the other cheek 3 times. Yeah. Well, you have 3 cheeks, I don't know. Some Buddhists are a bit sort of like of a soft touch. But I think in Thailand they're not. I think they tend to have a sense of pragmatism mixed in with that, which sort of makes it a little bit more doable. And it then becomes something more than just a principle. It becomes something you can actually use as a rule of thumb, which I think is one reason why Buddhism sort of has still quite a sort of robust presence in Thailand, and hasn't been sort of chipped away by people adding things which are completely impracticable to it.
See that person, or people go, here you go, do this, and I go, okay, I'll do it. Now that I've spoken up in the last couple of years and communicated with them, okay, those 3 things, I feel there's a new way of communicating throughout the office that more people are, I don't like how you're doing this or whatnot, but they're approaching those 3 things just by learning that. So it's weird how that flipped around.
Yeah, what seems like someone over here yesterday said, "Are you allowed to be selfish?" But it's to do with also sticking up for yourself sometimes, not being a complete doormat. Now there are situations to be a doormat in Buddhism too, But generally, you would want to be a doormat in order to have respect for something which is going to lead you to a better place. And this sort of unconditional sort of devotional obedience would come into place for maybe learning a new spiritual skill, or sort of proving yourself to a new teacher or something. It wouldn't be for paid salaried work, which is just sort of like what you do to to balance your bank account. It's not sort of some spiritual significance. This is sort of protecting your state of mind and your quality of life. Another one, which is sort of internet wisdom, saying no gives more meaning to your yes. So if you say yes every time someone gets you to do something, then somehow people don't even value you at all. If occasionally you say no, then when you do say yes, then they realize that has more value to it. So this is all to do with having less stress to do with time. Anticipatory. People feel dread not of a situation, but of the fear of what might happen or might go wrong with the situation. Exams, for example, you may have prepared well, but you spend your time being scared of what might possibly be a disaster that you have not prepared for, and because of that fear, you may underperform. Positive visualization is recommended. Really, that's meditation, but that's a sort of pep talk sort of language for it. For example, sports personalities may visualize themselves winning a race, and lo and behold, they have more chance of winning it. Simply because it's like they've rehearsed it in their mind so many times already. It somehow seems the natural thing to do. So that is a place that meditation seems to be able to fit in. Not so much just now, it's more about taking care of yourself, but here we're dealing with things that happen in the mind, and obviously meditation has an input. So positive visualization, meditation, and boosting your confidence can mean rehearsing things before you actually come around to doing them. Recently I had a doctoral, what's known as a viva. Don't know if they have them here. Oh, you do, you have a presentation. Yeah, you just rehearse it. You rehearse it, talk to yourself in the mirror, you prepare all the possible questions they could ever ask you. You say it out loud to yourself in front of the mirror, you time yourself doing it, so that when you actually come to the real people sort of interrogating you, actually feels like quite a disappointment, because you think of all the other questions they could have asked you if they were really trying harder. So yeah, it's a good way to overcome nerves, especially if you are a shy person. Situational stress. Where you have situations where you are not being in control. So getting fired from your work. So yes, perhaps become more self-aware of how it is making you feel, so that you don't jump to the conclusion that the worst is going to happen. If you catch yourself like fantasizing into the negative side of things, then try to rein that in before it actually spoils your day. If something bad's going to happen, then deal with it when it actually happens. If it's to do with dealing with other people, then maybe learn conflict resolution skills to represent yourself more fairly. Stick up for yourself, in other words. And sometimes you need to learn to think on your feet so that you can sort of respond even if unexpected things happen to you. There is a sort of, you might think, well, how can you prepare for the unexpected? But if you do it often enough in many situations, then you do get better at sort of talking your way out of situations. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's. Recently had it's a very new meditation student, and she only come for meditation 3 times. So she would have been meditating already for a maximum of 3 weeks, and she turned up with a letter, and she said, "It's a letter I've written to you, because I'm not sure I could have said it as well as I wanted to." And his letter was about how she'd just been fired from her work, which was a job she really liked. And I thought, oh, this is going to be like a bad news story here, and it's like sort of like going to blame me for like meditations led me to lose my job or something. But it was exactly the opposite. And she said, normally for me, if this had happened, it would just send me into a very negative place. I would be like, a walking disaster area. But she said, when I got this news, the first thing I thought to do was go away to somewhere quiet and sit down and meditate. So she went to some park bench somewhere with a nice view, and she sat down, and she said she had the best meditation of her life. Where inside, instead of just being like sunshine or something, it's like sunshine with diamonds and rainbows, and she felt happier than she ever felt in her life. At which point she realized that this whole thing about the job was really just, a triviality, and what was really valuable to her in her life was much deeper than that, etc. And she said she wanted to thank, this meditation center for having taught her the means by which, just to get a perspective on her life, sort of thing. So, even if the worst happens, it may not be the worst. As they say, one door has to close before another one opens. And it helps you to look on the bright side. Maybe if they fired you, then they weren't good enough for you. Yeah. And the worst comes to worst, in managing your emotions, so that you can sort of reason your way out of the situation, or at least bluff your way out of it. Encountering people which may create stress. Sometimes you feel scared of particular people or groups of people that intimidate you. Emotional intelligence sort of is some useful way of preparing yourself to deal with people who you feel intimidated by. This is Richard Goleman, isn't it? The idea being that with every person it's like you have this emotional bank account with them, which can be in good standing or it can be overdrawn, depending on how many promises you fail to keep when you are dealing with them. So if you have been a constant disappointment to somebody, emotionally speaking, then if you ever want to call in any favors, then you are likely to not receive much attention from them. But if you have built up you've done a lot of favors for other people in the past, then if you're ever to call in a favor, then you're more likely to receive their attention. So if you have lots of people who intimidate you, then sometimes the best thing to do is to try to get on the good side of them by managing to do something which they'll thank you for later. Yes.
And it was 4 kids, 4 girls. And one of the girls, she always come in, and whatever she do, she just kind of like, she works in the microphones and all the equipment, where the other girl come in and always like mess her with her stuff. So anyway, she missed 4 times. She get out of there. They take her away. Well, she did twice in purpose, like not show up because she wants to get out of there. So what would you help me to recommend her to overcome those kind of situations?
So the situation is she is good, but she doesn't do herself justice because she didn't turn up.
No, one of the girls don't like her to be in
Oh,
there.
so
she messes her
they
up.
favor someone who's not as good as her simply because that other person is more popular?
I don't know.
Um,
She's far away, so I'm gonna see her in November. But I would like to advise her what to do in those kind of cases.
Yeah. So is it to do with popularity?
I don't know.
Yeah, emotional intelligence is to do with popularity. So if that girl can be like favored more by the people who make decisions, then maybe they will see her for her true worth instead of favoring some other people who are not so good but more popular. So maybe getting in, learning to give time to those other girls in the group, maybe outside of that activity, would help her to be considered more favorably in that performance which you are talking about. Yeah, it's down to personal relationships, sometimes not just your skill set. So maybe that other girl is not so good, but who is always, they let her do what she wants, it's because she has better human relations with the rest of the group. And maybe that's something your girl can work on more, to be more of a team worker or something.
Well, the way I see it is like they feel jealous of her,
Yeah.
that girl. So I'm thinking, trying to meditate and how can I advise her? For me to advise her, I just kind of thinking to tell her, you had to like be stronger emotionally and physical. Well, physical will be like really release exercises. Yeah, I know I can teach her. But the emotional part, I don't know how to talk to her.
Yeah, I think generally this talk is saying nearly every case of stress, you need to look at two things. What is the trigger and what is the response to it? If you can change the trigger, that's good. In your workplace, you're being exploited, talk to them about it. But sometimes it's not easy to see what is the cause of the stress from the outside. And in such a case, one thing you certainly can change is your reaction to it. Especially on the emotional side, meditation will help. So if the girl is 8 years old, she can certainly meditate. And that will give her like a secret weapon by which she will not only become more popular, because her personality will become more open as a result, but also she will have more control of her emotions.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that would be an easy solution, which will help her in many ways, not just in the situation you're talking about. Yeah.
Thank you.
Here we go. Deep breathing exercises, about the same as meditation anyway. And learning empathy, which means learning to see things from other people's perspective. If a particular group of people are giving you problems, you have to get inside their head to look at the situation from their point of view and what is motivating them. If you are a particularly selfish person, you find that quite hard to do because you can't imagine things from anyone else's perspective. But if you are the sort of person who is maybe slightly more broad in your horizons, you realize how you fit into that other person's plan, and maybe you can adjust that to take a more important part in their plan if you can understand what is motivating them, what makes them tick. You might think, oh, it's all about having a great performance in the school, but actually what they want is publicity. They don't care who is going to give them publicity, they just want publicity. Maybe it turns out the other girl's father has a newspaper firm or something, I don't know. So how are you going to compete with that? In terms of scientific work with stress and meditation, there was some experiments done. Let's have a look at the whole thing. It was a comparison between those suffering from stress, and that's measured by their blood pressure. Generally, people with stress have high blood pressure, right? There was a group in the green, which was a control group, which they measured just their blood pressure over the course of 6 weeks. They did no meditation. However, those who did meditation during the 6 weeks, and I think it was an hour a day, following the same meditation method as we use, had a drop in the blood pressure even without taking any blood pressure sort of treatments other than that. So therefore meditation seems to have reduced and maintained a lower blood pressure for them, in a way that was significant. No, the one with the green did nothing special, but the one with the red, they did meditation, and therefore, as we see, the blood pressure was lower as a result. No, cortisol was included in the experiment, and I come to that now. You can also look at cortisol levels. A higher cortisol level means more stress, and in the same experiment, here we go, they discovered that even cortisol levels dropped in the group that meditated and stayed low in a significant way. Therefore, meditation seems to help people in coping with stress. You can do the same thing for people's pulse rate, etc. So stress and meditation seem to be connected. In England, they even have adopted meditation as an alternative therapy now for stress, where people can choose to learn to meditate instead of taking sleeping pills. And doctors now train themselves to be meditation teachers for those who wish to follow that alternative therapy. In fact, even some monks do it too. It's a funny story I know from a Sri Lankan monk who's a friend of mine, who qualified himself for what's known as a mindfulness-based stress, SR, stress, yeah. And in his little temple, every Tuesday night he gets these people in who pay several $100 for the privilege of being able to come and meditate with this monk and learn about other aspects of Buddhism. And in his class there are about 10 people who come every Tuesday without fail and pay a lot of money for the privilege. And on Friday nights he has a Buddhism class where the people come along and they meditate with him and get taught things about Buddhism, and it's free. And do you know how many people come for the class? 2 normally maximum. So people like paying for things. This is the truth of life. If you pay for it, then you value it more. So yeah, and he announced that he wasn't going to bother teaching Buddhism anymore. He was just going to teach mindfulness-based stress reduction, because that was how he could pay off the mortgage on his temple. Yes. Well, this is modern Buddhism. Yes.
The last two slides talked about how blood pressure and cortisol lowered
Yes.
with meditation, and so stress lowered. And I know that stress and cortisol being high are associated with being heavy, like being overweight.
Yeah.
So are there, or maybe it's coming up, are there studies that show that meditating, therefore lowering stress, also
Reduces weight?
reduces weight? 'Cause that'd be a winner. That'd be a
Yes,
this place would
I
be so
have.
crowded.
Yes, I have not heard of such studies being done. Yeah.
You should do it.
So you think the people lost weight?
Well, it makes sense.
When you're stressed, you don't allow blood flow to circulate properly, and so you're so tensed up, your body's not circulating properly, so you're not losing any weight. So, but if you meditate regularly, it should.
Oh,
We gotta sell it though.
yeah. Well, we have many different body sizes who meditate, and sometimes it doesn't seem to change, but people become happier.
Can I add something?
Yes.
I feel like when people are stressed, they also indulge in bad habits. Like, when you're stressed, instead of eating healthy, you'll go for something quick and easy, like a chocolate, because it's comfort food. So being stressed often leads to an unhealthy lifestyle, which does lead to weight gain. Lower blood pressure and better moods and lower cortisol levels can also be achieved by exercise. So, exercise and meditation can go hand in hand in improving your mental health as well as your physical health. Yeah. Okay. It has to be dark chocolate.
Especially on 8 precepts, it's very good. Yeah.
And not it has to be dark chocolate and eat it in moderation. It's true.
Yeah. I think people may differ from one another, but yes, we have some more chocolate fans over here. Yes, Karen.
About popularity. When something's trendy here in the United States, people will pay all kinds of money for it, and it kind of goes back to when you want to get a program or something to benefit people off the ground. Because I'm always trying to think of how to integrate meditation into what I do every day, that you have to make it look like it's something that's trendy. And then people will pay for it. But most things that are free and are truthful have been around for a long time, and
They're not trendy.
they're not cute and in and yeah.
So if it's trendy, it reduces stress more. Well, it's more spectacular, maybe. Yeah. Monks have this job to try to be constantly finding ways to remain trendy. Yeah, it's hard. It even may make the monks more stressed.
And you can't even change the colors of your robe, it's
Yeah,
just
well,
like
it's not possible. No, it's laid down in the unalterable truths in the scriptures. So they have to find new PowerPoint presentations and things instead. Yeah. Yeah. But I think, yes, there's a lot more research done than this, but the reason I picked this particular research is because it's to do with the meditation that we are following. But there's a lot more than this done with other forms of meditation too, mostly breathing meditation, I should add, and TM, which shows a relation between reduction of stress, and they would have control for things like loss of weight and so on, I would gather. Yeah. So there's something in it. I think it's probably much less arduous to meditate away your stress than to be constantly popping pills to do the same thing in a not very efficient way. So yes, stressors can cause stress, the triggers we come across in the world, but sometimes it's easier to take care of the way we react to those triggers. It's a better and more reliable way to reduce stress, to make us less vulnerable to that stress. And it's something that certainly we can do if we are meditators. Stress somehow will be deflected from us in a way that it wouldn't be if we our mind was simply absorbing stress in an undefended way. Yeah. One thing I should like to talk about, possibly only briefly though, which some of you touched on in your questions already, probably in your group sharing as well, the sort of things that we're up against in our meditation. Are you aware of 5 hindrances? Well, there's 5 and there's an extra one which I'll talk about. Probably just talk about the list. Choop, choop, choop. If I ask you, probably come up with this list by yourselves. But yes, traditionally there are 5. And every time we go into meditation, then generally we have to balance the mind to avoid one or more of these 5, which will arise in meditation and sort of get in the way of our mind becoming one-pointed. So sense desires, yeah, maybe the ones you would expect, being attracted by things around you, which are more interesting than the meditation. You know, if you're meditating next to the kitchens and you get the smell of the food coming, then that will obviously be a distraction. But sometimes it's more subtle than that. It can be sometimes desire for results in meditation. So beware of that. Some people are so intent on making progress in meditation that they strive much too hard in that direction. And as a result of that, they fail to make progress in their meditation. The moment they let go of the desire for progress, then the progress happens, strangely enough. So if you find yourself suffering from meditation in that way, then you need to back off sometimes, look for a way to enjoy your meditation, whether it has spectacular results or not. So to be happy with the journey rather than thinking constantly of the destination. And checking yourself to make sure you're not retensing your body as you're meditating, because sometimes you get progress. You know, you end up tensing up again after you've relaxed all your muscles in the beginning. You end up tensing up all over again from the this sort of desire inside to get results. Ill will, it tends to be anger of various sorts. It may be that you're an angry person, and therefore that comes through in your meditation as well. If that's the case, then you would work with loving kindness to reduce the anger in general in your life. Sometimes it can be anger towards the pain or discomfort that you're feeling as you meditate. Because if you sit for meditation for long enough, then you end up having discomfort in your knees or back perhaps. And if the pain is not enough already, sometimes you tense up because you don't like the pain, so it makes the pain even worse. In such a case, you may want to deal directly with the pain, possibly by finding a more comfortable way to sit for meditation. That might help you to concentrate better. For example, you might change posture or find a better cushion or support your back. Well, those things might help reduce the pain so that you can get past the ill will part of that. Some people, it's not so easy. The pain itself may be like a trick of the mind, which you have to go through in order to get to the other side. And sometimes you may want to train yourself to sit still for longer, so it may be worth going through the pain from that point of view to habituate your body to sitting still. So it depends. You may want to adjust your posture, or you may want to sit through it. It depends on what your long-term aim is with the meditation. Generally, to be able to sit on the floor on a meditation mat takes time if you're a Westerner. It took me 3 years, I know, because I haven't been brought up sitting on the floor like these lucky Asian people. Sleepiness. What do you do about sleepiness? Drink more coffee? Yeah, jittery. Actually, coffee just delays your sleepiness. It doesn't actually make the sleepiness go away. And you end up in another 6 hours feeling even more sleepy than you started out. And it's not good, especially around sleeping time, bedtime. So what to do about it? Well, traditionally there are different ways of dealing with sleepiness. You can, for example, not indulge in it. You can use your mantra more as a way to sort of have this sense of recollecting something the whole of the time. Using your memory faculty tends to make you less sleepy. Sometimes it's useful to check that you haven't forgotten something important in your meditation technique, because sometimes if you are sleepy, then you forget important parts of your meditation, like maybe the mantra. So because of that omission, your meditation technique is not complete, and therefore that's why your meditation is not going so well. You may try rubbing your face, pulling your earlobes as a way to wake yourself up in meditation. Yeah? No, I don't think so. It was for a different reason. But maybe a previous lifetime he had suffered from sleepiness. You may try drinking more water or using more water to wash your face. So that may involve getting up from meditation and going and doing that, freshening up. Dehydration is one reason people feel sleepy. So keeping your fluids levels up, it can be helpful to overcome sleepiness. You may try sitting in a bright place for meditation, or recalling more brightness in your meditation as a way to sort of make the meditation a little bit more awakening. Failing that, you may try walking meditation in between bouts of sitting meditation as a way to change posture. Sometimes in this temple we have all-night meditations. Not very often, I am pleased to say. In some temples they really go for this a lot. Generally we just have it once a year in our temple here. It's on the anniversary of the great abbot of Wat Phra Nam reaching Dhammakaya, usually in mid-September, full moon day of September. If you're meditating all night, it's quite arduous, and generally you can do it by sitting and then walking for a while and then coming back and sitting and drinking coffee. So if you are really tired, you may need to go and sleep it off. And the recommended way of doing that is to sleep on your right side with your hand on the pillow beside you, in a similar pose to the Buddha statues you sometimes see lying down, the reclining Buddhas. Not like that, but with your hand just on your pillow to one side, 2 feet one on top of the other. And generally you will have a mindful sleep, and you can sort of set your mental alarm to wake up in an hour and continue with your meditation. Yes? Your other one is at your side. Yeah, it should be on your body. This is on the top, isn't it? Yeah. Yes.
And one of the body positions, it says sleep like a bow.
A bow.
A bow. So your knees are up like this, and your hand is, like you said,
Yep.
here. The other hand is here, so it kind of makes the string of the bow. So instead of here, it's here on the knee. So you sort of, huh?
You need to do, yeah.
You're kind of sleeping like this. Hand is here, instead of here. And your knees are up, so it's more like your body's the bow and your arm is the string. Yeah, hand on your knee. Sleep like a bow.
Yeah, or your body can be straighter, depending
Yeah.
on what you find. But the important thing is to have the right side down,
Yeah.
not the left side down. So your heart is not doesn't have weight on it.
Yeah, and just as an observation I made, I was at the beach and I've seen a couple of homeless people sleeping on the sand, and they sleep like that. It's like, wow, they're doing it just right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's a recommendation and a half. But the important thing is, after you've done that, you come back and continue your meditation. You just don't sort of sleep. Absent-mindedness is having lots of thoughts in the mind. Generally, the mantra is the way out of that. Doubts and questions in the mind. If you have questions, then when you have the opportunity, ask about them. You may find also that if you give things the benefit of the doubt and just go for one of the possible choices, you get people, they sit for meditation, they see something, and think, am I really seeing this? Or is it just my imagination? Or is it real? Is it just my imagination? And they sit there and they get stuck at this sort of quandary. So if they just went for it, okay, maybe it's real, just go for it and see what happens next. You get past the question. Otherwise you get stuck at the question. So, you need to go for it sometimes. The +1, and I will skip ahead here. It's the abbreviated version. Yeah. Generally, when you are meditating, hindrances come at the time when your meditation has not got anywhere. Yeah? Hindrances tend to come at the time when you have not yet come to a point where you consider your meditation has really kicked in. But special hindrances, this +1, tends to happen just when you feel your meditation has actually started going quite well, and then this comes up in quite a surprising and sudden way. And from person to person, they differ in their attributes. And some of the ones which are commonly cited are feeling hot, not because you're sitting in the sun, feeling cold, your hair standing on end, like you saw a ghost, but there's no ghost. As you meditate, feeling that your body is swaying somehow. Usually it's not actually swaying, but it feels like it. Feeling as if your body is enlarging, when's my head going to touch the ceiling? or falling suddenly, like in clear air turbulence in a plane. But this is like sitting on a solid floor. It's like it opens up and you suddenly drop, like in an elevator, the cable just snapped. And you get this lurching feeling inside yourself. Feeling as if you're shrinking. Generally, it is as if you are being pulled down towards the floor, and it actually, anyone is watching you, you feel that you see that happening to them. It's like being pulled down. Yeah. What else? Floating. If you can really float, then you probably could become quite famous. Some people, it feels so convincing, they actually put their hand out to see how far they've floated. And you know what they find? That they're still where they were. It's because it's a feeling. Crying tears of joy, which are different from tears of anguish. Generally because they are cool tears, not hot ones. And there are many other variations. You can probably give me examples. But the thing that's similar about all of these strange phenomena is that they are sudden and surprising. So what to do about them? Well, you treat them like an sort of energy which arises. Somehow it's released at a time when your meditation is starting to go quite well. And the result of that energy will take a form where it can play a trick on your mind. Generally in a way that will throw you from your practice. For me, it's often imaginary mosquitoes, which works if you're in Thailand, and you can feel them coming and like lining themselves up ready to bite you, usually on the softest part of your skin. And if you're taken in by it and you open your eyes to see what this mosquito looks like, you find there's nothing there. So it generally comes in the form that you're most afraid of. So what to do about it? Well, you can be pleased that you're 99% of the way to a still mind, but what you actually do about it is pretend you're not interested. And only in that way can you go beyond it. Otherwise it will be the same. Every time you meditate, you get to that point and sort of, the moment you pay some interest to it, then you go back to having to start your meditation all over again. So, this is something you can be happy about in a way if you come across it in your meditation, but at the same time you need to be careful to go beyond it. So be warned. Yeah? So would you like to... Okay, question. Judy? Well, if the visions are at your center, then that's all right. But it may appear elsewhere, in which case you'd need to give them this treatment. Yeah, it's generally, if they're in your center, it's all right. Yeah. But sometimes your center can be very big. So they might be in your center. But anything that arises, generally the rule of thumb is that you take it in your stride, don't think about it too much, and see what happens next. Yes.
Center of the meditation. Okay, I have a particular color that indicates to me that I'm calming down, and my mind can stay with that color for some period, but it seems to me that it's here, not here. I can't tell the difference between the two, and yet the feeling of that color is one of complete calm and no thought. Does that matter at all, whether, like, not to hold on to that, but to pass through that? Because it very often passes on its own. But I've always thought to myself that that color was a base that was closer up here, and that I still needed to treat it as if I wasn't that interested in it, not enjoy it, not entertain it. So, and it's been going on for a long time, and this is actually the first time I've ever asked a question about it.
Well, it may be many things. I think the advice you've had in the past is probably all true as well. The only thing I can really add is when you see that color, rather than trying to analyze it, try having your point of view as your center. So even if the image appears up here, see it with eyes that are at your center, rather than going to where that object is located. So try to behave like a person with no head, where all your senses are based at your center. So you're looking up as if from your center at that object up there, not being up here with the object. And then the object will behave in a way that responds to that point of view, and it may actually decide it's part of your center, or it may pass and there'll be something else to follow. It's the point of view that's important rather than really the object. What we tend to do, if it's up here, then we associate it with our physical eyes, and then it becomes all about our awareness being up here somewhere rather than being centered. So in effect, it's not where the object appears, but it's where we see it from. So the headless wonder, yes. Yeah. And later it'll sort itself out to respond to that. But the thing is to get away from using our physical eyes as our main viewpoint.
So, I have a questions related to hindrance in terms of chronic pain. For example, my husband is disabled, so he has chronic, constant pain. So he can't sit in this position to meditate, but I want him to. So how do you help someone meditate?
No, I think to sit as upright as possible is good.
Mm-hmm.
But failing that, people can meditate lying down. But I don't recommend it if they're going to fall asleep. But if they are in chronic pain, they probably won't fall asleep anyway. So, work with what you have. And the idea is to be comfortable enough to forget your body. Some people come along with a whole lot of cushions, simply because a chair makes them, puts them in pain.
Mm-hmm.
So be it, they do what's necessary.
So he can lie down here and just meditate?
Here, I think they might have some problems with that.
Right.
But, with a lot of back support,
Mm-hmm.
on a chair, I would guess, or,
Okay.
try to find a way to be, he may want to meditate not with a group.
Right. Right.
You take the meditation method to him to meditate at home,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully the pain will reduce as a result of the meditation to a point where he can come and join in with the rest of the group and sit in some sort of, some sort of more upright posture by that stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
During the group discussions, I think a lot of people has seen the colors. Can you talk a little bit about it and how should we deal with it?
Well, yeah, in general, what you see is not as important as how you see it. So having colors is nice. It's more interesting than having black and white. But you should see it for what it is, which is a sign that your mind is starting to settle and to have some sort of dynamic of its own. So the colors are maybe changing, but you need to let that go further and let it come through to its full progression. So the question becomes, how can you maintain your mind further in that same sense of stillness, to the point where those colors can sort of lead through to a more substantial outcome. So it's good as far as it goes, and then you need to maybe give it more time to let those colors settle into something which then becomes more substantial. Yeah, very good already, but yes, you need more time on it.